events and hosting these events. So today we are discussing why it's so important to talk about climate change at the local level in municipalities and why it's so difficult as well. So I'm pretty sure that everybody knows the distinction between mitigation and adaptation, but it's always good to refresh the concepts. So when we are talking about mitigation, we are talking about how we can reduce the changes in the climate that we are seeing, and this is mainly about related strategies and action to reduce GHG emissions. While on the other hand, when we are talking about adaptation, we are talking about how we defend ourselves, how we prepare our people and our territories to be less vulnerable to the climate change impacts that are already here, and we have seen in Dubrovnik 2 days ago, for example. So the IDA project is mainly about adaptation. So we are talking about this today, and this is a pretty famous picture that says that in the future our cities will have to deal with a climate that is very different from what we have today, and this is why we have to adapt. So while mitigation is to reduce this shift of climate change, adaptation is to how to prepare to be ready to have Paris down there in means of temperature, for example, or extreme weather events. So of course, mitigation, we are talking about mitigation for many years now, and it's also important to keep going with mitigation because the climate is still changing and we have to do something about it. But it's also true that we have to adapt to what we are seeing impacts that are increasing in the last years. So we can go ahead with mitigation plans, but we have also to cope with preparing our territories, and this is very complicated at the municipal level to what is the impacts of climate change. In the last years, starting from 2005, we have seen different efforts from the national levels in implementing national strategies about adaptation also, rather than mitigation. Some of those are more successful than others, of course. Some of those are terrible, I guess, but there is some movement, there are some dynamics going on. But more important for us today is talking about what we can do at the local level. And it doesn't depend on what your nation is doing, if they have a strategy or not. We are seeing in the last years many cities taking action in first person by themselves or within a network of cities to implementing strategies or making pilot actions or projects about adaptation. So basically, climate change, adaptation and mitigation are global problems, but then we have to go down to the local policies that we can implement. And we have to consider that this is an effort that goes through different levels of governments, from local, regional, national, European, in the context of Europe. And at different levels we can have a different kind of role and tasks that are better to be developed at that specific level. We think that generally speaking, from national level to European level, it's more important to prepare a good and the right framework to make the action that we can take at the local regional level possible. That means that we have to change preparing supporting action that change the legal framework, the regulation, laws that make action at the local level more easier and possible. On the other hand, we have to engage municipalities and regional governments to actually implement some measures that are visible on your territory. So, for example, we are talking about urban planning mainly because we work with the urban planning sector, And at the local level is the right place to discuss about the design and implementation of strategic planning for adaptation, more than the other level. Or about spatial integration of the priorities of adaptation to urban planning. We have to engage with the local municipalities to do that. It's not possible to have this kind of strategy just dealing with national levels. So basically, when we're talking about the implementation of strategies or policies of adaptation to climate change, it should be a coherent and more or less coordinated effort from a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. That means that you engage civil society and local authorities from a bottom-up approach, and then you have some support from a top-down approach that can come from Europe or from the national government. Anyway, at this point, we have still a problem that is that there is still a lack of effectiveness in this approach in mainstreaming adaptation in the mandatory tools that we have. So everything is still on voluntary terms. And this is very complicated also because it means that the effectiveness of measures remains linked to the political will that is 4 years, and then if you not change the tools and the laws that you needed, the next 4 years maybe you don't have anything going on another time. So there are some obstacles, of course, in this, some barriers. We can summarize in these 6 points. These are the problem of including climate-proof planning at the local level. That is lack of information. The decision makers and policy makers at the local level, in many circumstances, do not have the know-how to deal with climate change issues because there is lack of information actually at that level, and so it's more difficult to make the sound decision.
Because when we speak about mitigation, it's easier because we can make a policy in a general way for nation or for a big part of the territory. But when we speak about adaptation, we need to, our measures are very specific, are very local, but one neighborhood is different from the other. So the information that we need and that you need to make a real measure, an effective measure, are very precise. So it's very different act in sense of mitigation and act in sense of adaptation. The different level of information are really different.
Yeah, you're right. This is why I wanted to do the distinction between mitigation and adaptation at the beginning, because while mitigation, of course, you can take action at the local level, but the strategies are pretty similar in every circumstances because the objective is then reducing GHG emissions. Adaptation is space and place specific for every city or neighborhood that we are talking about. And for that reason, it's more important to have local authorities engaged and have a level of information that is specific for the place we are talking about. Of course, there is problem with lack of economic resources. That means that we have not only lack of economic resources to take action, to implement the measures, but also to produce the information that we need. In many circumstances, we don't even have the information that we need to take the better decision. Then there is a problem of fragmentation in the decision-making process that go on the horizontal level. That means that climate change affects different sectors of your city that are responsibility of different departments, for example, and different actors. They can take action in a fragmented way, not coordinated, so making less effective the implementation of strategies. And there is fragmentation between vertical levels of government that can implement policies that are not coherent, for example. As well as regulatory and institutional constraints maybe we can find an innovative solution to adapt to climate change at the local level, but then we have problem with regulation that comes from another level that don't allow the implementation of this action. So we have to go back and forward between different levels to understand what is working, what it could work, but how do we have to change laws and regulations to make that happen, if it is possible. The lack of leadership, of course, it depends on the political willingness of people in charge of taking action in this kind of issue, and uneven risk perception that can be different between cities, also within cities and between different part of the society. These are not really solutions, but general concepts that can help to overcome these barriers. That, of course, we need horizontal integration, and that means mainstreaming climate policies within different departments at the municipal level, because really it affects public health, transportation, and the environment, water management, everything. So it needs to be mainstream at different level of the local administration. The same problem or same solution could be at the, we need to seek the same solution for vertical integration and open the dialogue between different level of governments. Knowledge integration is another issue. When we have knowledge, if we are lucky to have knowledge and information, many times it remains within one sector, it's not shared, there is no transparency of information, and this affects greatly the decision-making process. That is connected with knowledge, information, and transparency is the importance of the participation of stakeholders, and also for the acceptability of the action we are taking. Having the population, having different actors and different sectors involved, not only in the decision-making process, is very important to then find a better solution, make them understand that it is important to take action in this way, and then make them accept what we are doing from a local authority perspective. Okay, so we have been working in the last years on similar projects and trying to produce climate-proof planning methodologies. This is what we use. It can be changed, of course, depending on the context that we are in. But basically, it's a six-step cycle where we start trying to understand which are the strategies that a city already have in place that maybe is not directly connected or called about climate change adaptation, but every urban planning tools have already measures that can be linked to adaptation to climate change. So understanding what we already have is very important. Make a synthesis, summarize of what is already present. Understand which are the new vulnerabilities related to climate change in our city. On that, we can propose new actions. Understand those actions in which tools of, for example, in urban planning tools, which are the better tools to implement these actions, and then a monitoring system. So, in either project we work a lot on, part of the project is about understanding the vulnerability, and this is largely connected to the use of new technologies and the management of the knowledge that is already present in the place we are working with. So new technologies, and this is related with what we were saying before. The importance of understanding our places, because different places react to climate change impacts in a different way and can be adapted in a different way according to their systems and their level of information. So understanding how our cities are made, is very important to understand how we can adapt them to climate change. And new technologies are useful to start mapping these information. So these are just some of the analysis that we do usually, understanding in which area of cities we have more green areas, or where we have more permeable and impermeable areas, to understand where it's more likely that you have urban flooding, for example. Solar irradiation, to understand where is also more likely to have heat strike during urban heat island effects, for example. And of course we are trying to do this also in the IDEAL project, particularly within the work package 3 that is about the definition and monitoring of climate adaptation plans. That is divided in 3 steps. The first one, of course, about climate vulnerability analysis that will lead to the development of climate adaptation plans, and then eventually a monitoring system to see if we are changing actually something or not. So a bit of an overview of how it works. In the first phase that we are doing, output from this phase will be the methodology process that will be the description of step by step what we have to do, what we are doing. And for each of the 5 pilot areas that we have in the project, we will develop climate data sheets that mainly summarize the results of the vulnerability analysis that we are doing. Based on that, we also then, Giulia, we speak about the VP4, that is the decision support system, sorry, that is going along with this VP3, so they are not disconnected. So we developed 3 alternative plans possible based on the vulnerability analysis, and then with the engagement of stakeholders and the use of some indicators, we help the local authorities to select one version which is the best climate adaptation plan that we can implement in this area. And of course then we have to prepare a database of indicators to develop the monitoring system for each pilot area. So this is mainly the process within the process of climate vulnerability analysis that we already finished the first one part that is based on local knowledge. We asked you basically what are the impacts, starting from a big list, that you want to work on in your city because you know is important. And then the data collection that we need to do this kind of analysis on that specific impact, and then the evaluation, the vulnerability assessment that we are doing. So just some of the first results. This is a temperature analysis of the trend in Ostuni, for example, in Puglia, that is true, is getting hotter. Okay, so this is not fantasy. This is the graphic. We are trying to map green surfaces in urban areas to understand this is related also to urban flooding and the urban heat island effect. This is also the graphic is the differences within urban areas of temperature in the same time period, one day in, I think it's July, I don't remember. But see, there are differences of temperature within the same cities, depending on if we are in very urbanized areas, if there is vegetation or not. And according to this, we can take different actions in different places in the city. Very similar output that we are going to use in the implementation of the proposal of the actions is to understand where is more permeable and impermeable, to understand where is more likely to have flooding or not. And the same kind of analysis is going to occur for every pilot area. This is Misano, green surfaces, temperature analysis. This is urban areas, and this is residential areas within urban areas. And as well, permeable surfaces. And then the stakeholders engagement is also an important part. will be explained by Giulia.
Parallel to the WP3, we try to understand in WP4 what are the stakeholder and decision maker perception of this program. Because many times when we have a lot of analysis, we have a lot of technical results. If the population, if the stakeholder, if the local authorities don't perceive this problem are unuseful, totally unuseful to have a lot of analysis because are not used. If I don't perceive that my house is in a dangerous place, I don't do nothing to adapt my house to flood the problem or maybe to avoid a lot of high temperature in summer and cold temperature in winter. So it's very important to understand what people perceive of the problem, what perceive of is vulnerability, and try to develop a real plan able to help this person and not another. So the WP4, that is setting up a decision support system as a help to climate change adaptation planning, want to understand the policymaker objectives and priorities, because many times data tell us that the priorities is, for example, flooding, but for our administrator, this is not a priority, because many happen just one time every 100 of years, this program, so it's not a problem in my period of, in my mandate, so I don't want to care about that. So it's very important to also understand what people want to work. Then current and shared a set of indicators in order to assess climate adaptation plans, because also the indicators that we use have to be understandable, because many times we use very technical things that don't say nothing to others that are not technicians, so are not useful for us. We have to construct, the general decision support system that try to link vulnerability analysis developed in WP3 and stakeholder and decision maker perception. Then we try to adapt the general DSS to each specific pilot area, because in the project we develop one decision support system that will be adapted in each of the 5 pilot cities, and this will be linked with the GIS database. And finally, we use this model to assess the alternative climate adaptation plans. Not with the plan, but maybe just several measures. Maybe we want to decide if it's better, if we have the priority to adapt to one neighborhood or another, maybe with our decision support system we can understand which is the best place to start our adaptation plan. Also, the WP4 is structured in three tasks. The 4.1, that is the construction, the common and shared evaluation framework. The 4.2 is setting up a DSS and support to climate change adaptation plan. And finally, the training on DSS, that this will be linked with the monitoring system, of course. The 3 steps, in this moment, we almost finished the first task. We developed the stakeholder mapping for each pilot cities. We started the surveys and interview of the stakeholders and decision making. We try to find some best practice for each pilot cities that are able to suggest us what are the intentions, what are the vision that our stakeholder, that our decision maker and our partners have to his cities. And of course the set of indicators that at this moment we develop a big set of indicators, not really big, but a medium set of indicators that then will be selected in a more specific way by the several partners in order to really understand what happened in their option plan. In the 4.2, we developed the decision support system that will be linked with the data sheets to select the alternative climate adaptation plan. And finally, some training on the SS in order to use this kind of tool not just in this project and to assess this kind of plan, but we want that our partner, the administration that work in this project could be able to use this model also in other circumstances, also in other plans that they want to implement. This is just to show you some what we develop now. For example, this is the stakeholder mapping of the Misano Adriatico. Where you can see the blue ones are the decision makers and the green are the stakeholders. We divide in that way in order to give the interview and the questionnaires that we are going to. This is the era stakeholder mapping that we have to change now, but okay. Then these are the medium list of indicators that we already select in our previous meeting in Ostuni. Are not a so big list, but are too much to assess one plan. So in the next step, each pilot city will select 1, 2, or 3 indicators for each group of for each objective. So for environmental, for social, for economic and legal, institutional, and perceptional. And the next step of the project are to finalize the analysis, of course, in the next 1-2 months at maximum. Finalize the best practice catalog that we are almost done. Stakeholder survey and policymaker interviews. Develop the guideline to the climate adaptation plan that we will prepare for our partners. And of course, develop and finalize the DSS. And thank you.
You can have a seat, please, both of you. It's time for questions. Anybody?
Hello, Željko Šimek from Ministry of Environment and Energy. I have a question for Giulia.
Yes.
Can you go back to indicator list? You invented this list, or you take it, I don't know, from yourself?
Yes, we started to create this list from the previous project Terre that the ideal come from, and all these indicators coming from scientific literature or other plans, climate plans.
My question is, why don't you use the Eurostat indicators for climate change adaptation or ASDG indicators for climate change?
Because are almost impossible then for us to monitor that. Because the question is that this indicator has to be linked with the vulnerability analysis that we done. So we need to monitor the evolution of this indicator, and we can wait for a new update of Eurostat indicator.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other question? Okay, can I do something? What is, Michele, your suggestion? What will be better for strategy if local will give instruction to global, or global to local? I mean, top down or bottom up? What's better, in your opinion?
Related to adaptation, I think the bottom-up approach is more effective, is quicker. It will require political willingness of the person and the team in charge of the city to take action on that, but I think that we cannot escape from the concept that we need the engagement of the local authorities and also of the population within cities to really counteract the climate change. So, of course, we need the support of a top-down approach and changes in regulation and framework, but if we don't start from local, it will be much more difficult.
So that means that we have to go first with activities, of course.
Yes, and we already seen it. There are many cities that already started working on climate change adaptation before the national strategies are even started. So I think the bottom-up approach from cities is more effective.
My next question, same thing. Okay, yes, of course.
You want just add a small adding to this answer, because national strategy, in our experience, is more linked to adapt the political documents and, for example, the tools that our administration can use. But then select action, select measures, it's almost impossible in a national strategy. So, for definition, national strategy are general, have to be good for a city that stay in the coast, like in the mountains. So the approach are completely different for an effective strategy and an effective adaptation measure. But national strategy are good to say to everybody, you have to do something and you have to use the tools and the instrument that you already have, but maybe you have a new instrument that you can use.
That's the reason why I asked about bottom-up or top-down, because I saw your slide, very interesting slide about temperatures in urban areas. What can I do? What can we do? We have to start.
Okay, basically when we are dealing with different areas with different temperature, the urban planning department is really calling, because how the city is built is responsible for the differences of this temperature. So increasing in certain areas green infrastructure, different color of the roads can help. Of course, we have to take emergency measures also, understanding who is living in those areas, if they need to be assisted quicker than in other areas during period of hot. So it comes a lot from the administration, but also rising awareness that you are living in a hotter place. If you are compared to another neighborhood, can help to understand that okay, I have to pay attention to this also.
Most of locals were looking and we are in red area, sorry. Just kidding. Of course, any other questions? Okay, Giulia, Michele, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.